Okay, hello everybody. Welcome back. We want to look at session 6. We want to learn how to create and manage databases using Microsoft SQL Server. Okay, so here we are. Now, the objectives for this session, after this class, the students will be in a position to describe system and user-defined databases. We'll look at the key features of the AdventureWorks database. It's a sample database. I'll show you where you can get it and how to download it and install it in MySQL Server. The participants will also be in a position to learn how to add file groups and transaction logs. You'll also learn how to create a database, list and describe the types of database modifications, describe the procedures to drop a database, and you'll also learn how to create a database snapshot. Okay, introduction. Now, a database is a collection of data stored in data files on a disk or some removable medium. And database consists of data files to hold actual data. An SQL Server database is made up of a collection of tables which store sets of specific structured data. A table includes a set of rows. And remember, we also call them records or tuples, and columns, also known as attributes. And each column in the table is intended to store a specific type of information. For example, dates, names, currency, amounts, numbers. You can also store student numbers. You can also store your marks and many other things in the database. Now, a user can install multiple instances of SQL Server on a computer, and each instance of SQL Server can include multiple databases. Within the database, there are various object ownership groups called schema. So this is what you're calling a schema. And a schema basically is like a container where you can have tables, you can have views, and all sorts of other database items. Now, within each schema, there are database objects, as I was mentioning earlier, tables, views, and stored procedures. Some objects such as certificates and asymmetric keys are contained within the database, but they're not contained within a schema. And SQL Server databases are stored in files within the file system, and these files are grouped into what we are calling a file group. So please note that a file group is a container whereby we store the files. Now, when people gain access to an instance of SQL Server, they are identified as a login. Works the same way you log into a computer. Now, actually what happens, although this is in the admin course, that is the SQL Server admin course, there's a database administrator who will create an account for you. Once they create an account for you, they create a password and a username. They give you these credentials, you log in, and then you can change in your password to whatever it is that you want, just like you do in your computers. Now, once you gain access to the database, we identify you as a database user. And a user who has access to a database can be given permission. You remember we talked about the DCL. DCL is data control language. We give you access to some objects. We can also deny you access to some objects. And this is usually done according to your job definition or your job description. Now, though permissions can be granted to individual users, it is recommended to create a database roles, and then you add the users to the roles and then grant access permissions to these roles. The reason why we are doing this, think of an organization with 5,000 employees. It would be quite hard for somebody to remember all these permissions. Yes, it can be done, but it's easier for you to create groups like accounts, lecturers, all these other various groups of employees, then you give them permissions. So granting permissions to roles instead of users makes it easier to keep permissions consistent and understandable as the number of users grow and continually change. Now, SQL Server supports 3 kinds of databases, and they're given here. The first one is the system databases. These ones are basically created as you install SQL Server. We have the databases that you and me create. We are calling these user-defined databases, and we have the sample databases, the one we referred to earlier, like AdventureWorks databases. We also have another one called the Northwind database. You can look it up on the internet. Now, what are system databases? SQL Server uses system databases to support different parts of the database management system. And each database has a specific role and stores job information that requires to be carried out by SQL Server. The system database stores the data in tables, which contains the views, stored procedures, and other database objects. They also have associated database files, for example, .mdf and .ldf files, and these are physically located in the SQL Server machine. We'll see these once we're doing the practicals. And the following table shows the system databases that are supported by SQL Server. Now, on the left hand, we have the database, and on the right hand, we have its description. We have the master database, and basically, this database records all system level information of an instance of SQL Server. We have the MSDB. So this database is used by the SQL Server agent to schedule database alerts and various jobs. The next one is the model. So the database which is used as the template for database to be created on the particular instance of SQL Server. We have the resource database, which is a read-only database and contains the system objects which are included with SQL Server 2012. And finally, we have the temporary database, that is the TempDB. And this basically holds the temporary objects or intermediate result set. That is, once you execute a query and you've not yet committed, we actually store these results in the temporary database or the TempDB. Now, changing or modifying system data. Users are not allowed to directly update the information in the system database objects, such as system tables, system stored procedures, and catalog views. However, you can avail a complete set of administrative tools, allowing them to fully administer the system and manage all users and database objects. And they are given below. We have the administration utilities. Now, from SQL Server 2005 onwards, several SQL Server administrative utilities are integrated in SQL Server Management Studio, that is SSMS. And basically, this is the core administrative console for SQL Server installation. This is where we are going to be spending most of our time in this particular course. And it enables us to perform high-level administrative functions, schedule routine maintenance checks, and so on. This is an overview of the SQL Server Management Studio window. We can open this very quickly. So let me switch over to your machine and open this. Just give me a moment. Okay, I'll click Start. And from Start, I have it pinned on my Start menu. I'll click on it, Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio. This is version 17. Most likely at the time of you watching this, there could be a later release. You can check that online. Now, as it's opening, I would like to answer a very important question. So how do we get SQL Server and how do we install it? So I'll switch over to a browser as this is opening. Now I'm in the browser. You can open any search engine that you would like to use. I'll come inside the Google search engine and type in SQL Server, download. Now, your course is using SQL Server 2012 and 2016, so I'll look for SQL Server 2016. And I'm going to download the community edition. This is actually free for you to use and set up on your machine. The other versions, like the enterprise edition, of course, you have to pay a pretty penny for that. So download SQL Server 2016, then community edition. I'll click on this and it opens up for me in the browser. I'll check this. This is the first option. I'll right click on this and select open in a new tab. Okay, now it takes me to the 2019. I don't want the 2019, so I can go back and select this. So yeah, this is actually the correct link. So open in a new tab. So at the time of recording this, this was the latest version. You can download this, and basically you can see this is there's a free trial, and basically it gives you a 180-day free trial of SQL Server, and this is on Windows. So if you're using a Mac, okay, I don't know, maybe you can install a virtualization client and see if it's going to work for you. Now let's switch back. I'll select the language. So I would like to download this in English. Okay. Now, there are some important details you need to read to find out if your machine will be in a position to run SQL Server or not. So look at the system requirements. So it requires Windows Server 2016, Windows 10, Windows Server 2012, Release Candidate 2, Windows 8 or Windows 8.1. You can use an Intel compatible processor with a minimum speed of 1 gigahertz or faster. You require about 512 of RAM. Of course, this is the bare minimum. And basically, you require a minimum of about 4.2 GB of space on your hard disk to have this running. Now, the installation instructions are given here, and there is additional information which you can read here. So please click on the download button. Now, I've already downloaded this. I'll show you my download. Let me show you. Now, I've downloaded it. It's here. This is the Express edition or Community edition. And it's quite large. It's about 1.4 GB. So this is going to take some time to download. Now, I also talked about the sample database. And I'll also show you how to download that very quickly. So come back here and type in here. Download, yes, AdventureWorks database. AdventureWorks. Okay. Now, there are two locations which you can use. You can actually use GitHub, or you can come and download it from Microsoft SQL Server. So I'll come here, right click on this. I'll actually open both of them. We are done with this, so let's close this. So I'll close these two, then we come here. Now, we want the OLTP. OLTP is short for Online Transaction Processing. That is the version which we want to use. So please select the one for AdventureWorks 2016. Right click on it and select Open in New tab. And basically it's going to start downloading this. So I've already downloaded it. So let me show you what I have. So we are good to go. We have both of them. We have the SQL Express and we have the AdventureWorks database already downloaded. I'll show you how to install this later on. Let me just go back to what I was illustrating. So we minimize this and go back to your slide. We go back to the machine we use in class. And you can see we have this prompt. Now, what this does is that, remember we've talked about for you to access the database, you must have a login. So the first thing you always do is to select what you want to log into. You click on this drop-down list. We have analysis service, we have the reporting services and integration service. Right now, we're interested in connecting to the database engine. We select the server we would like to connect to. Remember, we've said that you can have several instances of SQL Server. The machine that we'll be using on campus is this SQL Server. Now, yours will be localhost. Once you install it on your local machine, this will be localhost. You select the way you want to connect to that. So there are two methods. We have the Windows authentication and we have SQL Server authentication. Now, there are other newer methods, but for our purpose, these are the two most commonly used: Windows authentication and SQL Server authentication. So for our class right now, we'll be using Windows authentication, although we can still use the other one, Windows authentication. And you notice that these two are grayed out. But once you select SQL Server authentication, it allows you to type in a username and a password, and of course you can remember this for easier access for future login. So we said we want to use Windows authentication. Now I'll click on connect, give it some time to connect, and we are connected. So you can see now we have what it is that we have here. So this is the server for the machine which was used to make the slides. This is what we currently have in our campus. Okay, now the next one is SQL Server Management Object, SQL SMO API. So this includes the complete functionality for administering the SQL Server in applications. And we have TSQL scripts and stored procedures, Transact SQL script and stored procedures. So this use system stored procedures and Transact SQL data definition language statements. And the following figure shows a TSQL query window. So we can see the query window, and this is where we'll be writing our queries and executing them, and this is called the results window. So once you type in a query, it doesn't have any errors. You get the results displayed down here. And of course, this tells you that the query executed successfully. There are times, for various reasons, that your query might not execute successfully. We will see this later on. Okay, viewing system database data. Now, database applications can determine catalog and system information by using any of these approaches. System catalog view views displaying metadata for describing database objects in an SQL Server instance. We have SQL SMO. The new managed code object model. We'll be looking at what is managed code later. So this is a new managed code model object providing a set of objects used for managing Microsoft SQL Server. We have catalog functions, methods, attributes, and or properties of the data application programming interface. And this is used in ActiveX data objects, that is ADO, object linking and embedding database, or open database connectivity applications. We have stored procedures and functions. So these are used in transaction SQL as stored procedures and built-in functions. Now, how do we go about creating a database? To create a user-defined database, you require the following information: the name of the database you would like to create, who is going to be the owner of that database, how big it's going to be, the files and file groups which are to be stored in that particular database. The syntax to create a database is given below. So we have this. So create database, then the name of the database. Then on, you specify the file group which you're going to do that. Then you tell us where you're going to log this information, and you can specify a collation order. Now, I just want to explain this. I've already explained this, so I'm not going to go through them. Now, collation. A collation defines the rules for comparing and sorting character data based on the standards of a particular language and locale. And the collation name can either be a Windows collation or an SQL collation name. This is defining how we are going to store the character set. Is it using UTF-8? There are quite a number of collations. We'll see this as we go about it. So we have an example here. So we have create database, customer DB on primary, name. So the name is customer DB. We specify the file name. Then we specify the log where we are going to be logging. Logging simply means anytime that you're conducting any transaction on a database, we need to log that maybe Nyanjui added a new table at this time. Nyanjui deleted this particular record at this particular time. Logging basically enables us to recreate transaction in case something goes on. Also, this can be used for auditing purposes. Then we have the collation type specified here. Now, after executing the code, SQL Server displays the message command completed successfully. So we have this, and you'll notice that this is added here. So I'm going to run this code very quickly in your server. So give me one moment to switch. Sorry, I forgot I told you we need to do the installation. Now, I'll switch back over so that we can do the installation. After that, we then get to execute the commands. Let me just switch back. We do the installation, then come back and execute the commands. We want to install SQL Server. Now, to do this, we double click on this icon. You will need admin privileges to do this. So I'll double click on this icon, give it some time. Now, you need to type in an admin password for your machine. So I'll pause the video and do that. Then we start the installation. Now, once you do this, you have to select a directory where the temporary files are going to be extracted. So you click on OK. Now, I want to use a faster drive. So I'll select this SQL SVR 2016. Click on OK. Then give it some time to do this. Okay, now this is going to take some time, so I'll pause the video here. Then once it finishes, we'll resume. We'll come back and continue recording. Now, we want to install SQL Server. It has finished extracting the file, so please click on New SQL Server Standalone Installation or add features to an existing installation. We have to accept the licensing agreement. Place a check mark here. Click on the next button. Then make sure you don't select this. The reason why I'm saying this is that it's actually going to go online to check for updates. So if you have some time, you can do that. It actually gives you the latest files, which is the best option. But for the sake of the video and time, I'm going to leave it deselected. I'll click the next button. Then I give the computer some time. So it does some check on your machine. And if you have these three, your machine is good to go. In case of anything, maybe you can make some corrections. So we click on the next button. Now, make sure we select the instance features which we are interested in installing. Now, I don't want to, I'll select this. Then make sure you deselect the R services. R is a software used by Microsoft. We don't want to install it. So you can omit it for now. Now, after this, we select what it is we would like to install our application. The default works fine, but some of us may want to install in a custom location. You can click on this button and browse where you want to install. Word of caution, please make sure that drive is not compressed. If you try to install in a compressed drive, it's not going to work. I'll click the next button. Give the computer some time. Name your instance. I'll call mine SQL SVR 2016. Then click here in the instance ID field. It updates that automatically. Click on the next button. Give your computer some time, after which you click on next. Now, before we click on next, we just make sure that this is a standalone Polybase instance. I'll click next. Okay, question. What about if what is this option for? This option basically allows you to use your machine as part of a Polybase scale-out group. That is, if you have several machines running SQL Server with Polybase, your machine can be connected to that. But ours is standalone. We click on next. Now, these options, just leave them as they are. And one word of caution, SQL Server is a bit heavy on resources. I'm going to switch off the startup type and set it to manual. If you don't know how to start and stop services, just leave it as it is. But just note that your machine will be a bit slow, since every time that your machine starts up, SQL Server is going to be starting up. So mine, I'll change this to manual. Okay. After that, you can place a check mark here and click on next. After that, give your computer some time. Now, we want to specify the how we are going to be logging in or accessing our database server. We are going to use mixed mode, whereby I talked about. We are going to use both SQL Server authentication and Windows authentication. So please select this option. Once you select this option, it allows you to type into these two boxes. We want to type in the password for the server system administrator. This is the person who administers the database and they have unlimited access. Please choose a secure password, because if you select a weak password and a hacker gains access to your server, you can be sure that your data will be seriously compromised. I'll enter the password here very quickly. For the sake of this course, I'll make it very simple to spare on a lot of typing, and kindly make sure that whatever password it is that you use, make sure it's something very easy for you to remember. Now, you can add users to this particular machine, and if you want to be added as an admin to this particular instance, you can click Add Current User. I'm going to skip that for now. I'll click Next. We click Next. Then we can install the reporting services in native mode. So kindly click Next. Okay, let's just install them. We'll configure them later. So we click Next. Then we wait for this to start the installation. Now, this is a long process, and it's going to take some time depending on the speed of your machine. So we are going to pause here, and we'll come back once the machine is finished. Now, the installation is complete, as you can see here. What I do now is to click on Close. The next thing we want to do is to install SQL Server Management Tools, that is SSMS. So to do this, I'll click on the second option. So please click on Install SQL Server Tools. So this is the page where we're going to download SQL Server Management Studio. We click on this link here. I hope you can see what I'm doing. So I'm saying we click on this link here, download SSMS. We click on this. So at the time of this recording, version 18.5 was the latest, and I have this option. So I'll click on Save. I'll pause the video here, download it. Then once you come back, we are going to install this. Now, as you can see here, I finished downloading the SSMS setup. So at this particular juncture, you can close the SQL Server Installation Center. Now, to install this, it's just a matter of double-clicking it. We give it some time to open. You type in the administrator password. Now, you can leave the defaults, or you can change them if you want. I'm just going to leave it at the default. Then I click on Install. I'm going to give this some time to install, and once it's done, we are going to continue with the recording. Okay, all done. We click on the Close button, and from here, we're going now to be running the queries either on our local machine or the machine that we use in class. Once our installation is complete, we need to find out if everything worked as expected. To do this, please click on your Start button. Then you type in SSM. Okay, we have what it is that we're looking for here. I'll click on the icon here to launch it. Give your computer some time. Okay, we have the splash screen. The application is open, as you can see here, and it's prompting me to log in. I'll show you how to do this in your class machine. Then for practice, you'll do this here on your own. So let's go back to the class machine. To do this, we click on the file menu in the top left corner. We select new. We are going to select a project. project simply will be a collection of the scripts which you're going to use, and we're going to create 2 projects. Now, when you're working with the SQL Server Management Studio, you basically have a project stored in a solution, and inside the project you have the scripts which contain the SQL commands which are to be sent to the database engine. So in the new project window, you make sure that the first option is selected, SQL Server Management Studio project. You select SQL Server scripts. As I've said, this is where we are typing our SQL commands. Then you give the solution. You give the project a name. You can call this class session scripts. The solution name should be different. This is going to be your class. This is going to be determined by when you were admitted. For those of us who enrolled in 2019 May, your class code will be ADSC 1805. If you were admitted in May 2020, the class folder is going to be ADSC 205. Now, to make it simple for everybody, I'm going to use 4 X's for the placeholders. The first 2 will be for the year, then the other 2 will be for the month. So please call your solution name according to when you are admitted. ADSC, then I'm going to use the placeholders for the class. The next thing you need to do is to specify where you're going to save this. Now, this is the default location. If you want to save in another location in your machine, feel free to do so. Please make sure that this option is selected so that your work is created in a separate directory or folder. Then click on. Now, nothing has changed, but I would like to point your attention to the top left corner, Solution Explorer. If you click on this, you can actually see your solution. We have this, and I'm going to be giving you assignments. So what I want you to do very quickly is to right click here, then you select Add, you select the option New Project, then same options. Here you specify this will be for either learning scripts, practice, or assignment scripts. I leave that at your discretion. I'll call mine practice. Tap on enter, then click on the OK button. Now you can see that your solution can have several projects. After that, we go to the second option inside the class scripts. This is now where we are going to create the scripts where we are going to type in the commands. I'll make this very simple for everybody. Every new session that we start, we are going to create a new query, and then we type in the commands inside there. Now currently we're in session 6. I'll right click here, then select the option New Query. The query is created for us, and what we want to do is to rename it. I'll come back here. I'll pin this. Then once we are through, I'll unpin it or auto hide it. I'll right click on this and give it a name, the second option from last. Select on rename. The name to be given is SES 6. We are learning how to create databases. I'll type in CreateDB for short. Then tap on enter to confirm the name. You notice that that change is made here immediately. Now, for each of these scripts, we will be writing what exactly we are doing, and we're going to do this via a comment. So click on line 1 here, and I know some of you don't have the line numbers. To enable the line numbers, this is how you go about it. Select Tools option in your menu bar, then select Options. Then from here, go to Text Editor, then select TSQL option. Under Text Editor, you select TSQL, then come and place a check mark in line numbers, then you click on the OK button. Now let's write what it is that you're going to be doing in this particular session. We write the purpose of this particular session. I'll use the multi-line comment. this session will be used to illustrate full stop. Now I'll copy that command from your slides and paste it inside here to save on some time. Now I've copied the code and made some modifications if you look at it. And as we are doing this, I would like you to observe something. We have this yellow line here. What this does is that it tells you you have some dirty or unsaved code. So every time you type in some code, make sure you always save it. And once you save the code, you can see that now the yellow line changes into a green line telling you that the code has been saved. I was saying that I have made a small modification. Since this is the college server, we have a lot of databases with that name. To avoid a name collision, I've actually added my name at the end of this. You can add this, but since it's your own personal machine, I don't see the need for this. Now everything else remains the same, and we are going to execute that. But just before that, remember, it's always good practice to write the purpose of the command which you are executing. So the purpose of this is, now I'll execute this command. So what you usually do is to highlight what it is that you want to do. And we have this small green arrow here, which allows you to execute the currently highlighted command. You can also come to the query menu, and from here you click on execute. The keyboard shortcut is F5. So please feel free to use any of these options to run your code. Now I'm going to click on this, and you can see what is happening here. The system cannot find. Okay, now this is what caused this particular error. This is, I copied this from your slides, and remember your slides are for SQL Server 2012. So you'll have to change the MS SQL, this 11, you change it to 13, and everything should work as expected. I'll do that very quickly. I'll double click on this word, then go to edit, then look for this option, find and replace. This option, Control H, is the keyboard shortcut. Then I'll replace this with, this is MSSQL, then 13. Make sure you check the spelling. Then you click on this option to replace all. Then click on OK, and you can close this. Now highlight it. So click on execute. Now we can see we're still getting an error even after I made that correction. Now this is caused by the system is not finding the specified path. So in case you get any error messages, it's always very helpful for you to look at this. Now I'd like to show you the machine which we are executing these queries on, and so that we can see the path. Now if you look at this, I've gone to that particular path where Microsoft SQL Server is installed. And if you look at these two, you can see it's telling us MS SQL Server, MS SQL data. Then that is how we are supposed to create the database and the log. And if you look at the path inside here, there is a small variation. Now to correct this error, what I'm going to do is to click on this, then click on it once again, then I'll copy, then come here. So this is what I need to make changes to. So I'll highlight the whole of this, then paste, and also make sure to make the correction here as well. Control V to paste. Now I think everything is set up properly and we can execute our query. So I'll highlight, click on execute, and we still get a problem. Okay, let me see what the problem is. Just one moment. Okay, seems our database is not cooperating, but I think I figured out what the error is. Now, the reason why I had broken this down is so that you could everything could fit in on your screen, but it seems I'll have to do that. I hope you can see here without scrolling. So it's the same thing. So what I'm just going to do is to ensure that everything is on one line. Now, once I do this, ensure to save your work. Please come here, highlight, then click on execute. Good, voila. There, the command completed successfully. I'll switch very quickly to the Object Explorer. I'll click here. So just one moment. So the command has completed successfully, and it's everything that we had inside here. I'll switch to the Object Explorer, and once I refresh, yeah, you can see the database is created here. So this was not there. Now, make sure you do that to avoid that particular error. So I'll just break it again so that you can see everything, but once you're executing this, make sure that you execute everything in one line, both for the log and for the database. We want to ensure that we don't get the same errors we got in our local machine. I'll switch over there. So I'll restore down, come here, log in very quickly. I'll click on connect. Then we create a new project. So file, new, then we select project. We called this class session script. We have the class session scripts and we have the solution name as we had it in the campus machine. Remember this option, create directory for solution, click on OK. Then we can see everything is created as expected. I'll come here, create a new query, right click on it, select the option, rename, enter. Now I'll copy the values from your class machine to save on typing. So let me switch over. So copy this, then paste this. I'll add the line numbers later. Just want to see if this is going to work very quickly. So remember to check your paths. So we are checking in drive C. I'll come down here, expand. I'll double click on local disk C. Expand, go to program files. This is installed in Microsoft SQL Server. Remember, this was the path. Please click this as we did. Right click, copy, go back, then come here and paste, Control V, then highlight here, Control V to paste. Remember, everything has to be in one line. I'll auto hide or unpin this. Then remember what we did here. Okay, so hold your breath for the moment of truth. We highlight this, click on execute. And now the reason why this is failing is, if you read this, I told you these are good diagnostic methods. It's telling you that we don't have permissions to create database. What you need to do is to change the connection and use SQL Server authentication. Then remember what it is that we used to do this. We used the system administrator. Then type in the system administrator's password. Then click on connect. Now execute the query. And ta-da, everything is done. So if you come here to the Object Explorer and you click on the refresh button, you can see that the customer database is created. Now, as a brief assignment, I want you to find out how you can assign yourself permissions to create databases in this particular database. Now, you can see we can actually run these commands in both the machine in campus and your local machine. Let's continue. Okay, next slide. Modifying or making changes to databases. Now, as a user-defined database grows or diminishes, the database size will be expanded or shrunk automatically, or of course you can still do this manually. And the syntax to modify a database is given below. So we type in alter database and the name of the database you wish to change or modify. Then you can add or modify files. You can add or modify file groups, set database options, modify the name and set it to a new name. And you can also even change the collection name. Now, the explanation of each of these is given down here. We move on. Now, we want to rename the database that we just created from customer DB to CastDB. As usual, I'll copy this and paste it in the machine. As you can see here, I've pasted in the command and made the changes to it. Please pause the video and do the same. After that, I'll highlight the command, then click on the execute button, and you can see it tells me the database name has been set. Now, if I go back to the Object Explorer, you can see this is the old name. To see the changes, I'll have to click on the refresh button. Refresh. Okay, it has refreshed. Then you can see now the new name is reflected here. So that is how you make changes. Okay. There. Then ownership of databases. Now in SQL Server, the ownership of a user-defined database can be changed, and ownership of system databases cannot be changed. Now, to do this, we use a system procedure. SP is short for system procedure. SP change DB owner, that is database owner. So this stored procedure is used to change the ownership of the database, and the syntax is as follows. SP change DB owner, then you specify the login name, then you do that, where login is an existing username. Now, when this particular stored procedure is executed, the new owner is known as the DBO. DBO is database owner inside the selected database. Now, the DBO receives permission to perform all activities on that database, and the owner of the master model or a temp DB system databases cannot be changed as stated earlier. The following code snippet, when executed, makes the login SA the owner of the current database and maps SA to existing aliases that are assigned to the old database owner, and will display command completed successfully. Now, in your home machine, since you're the owner or you're executing this as SA, so there is no need to execute this, but in a school machine, maybe we could change this. But if I do that, unfortunately, I'll not be able to work with this. So I'll not execute this command for that particular reason. Now, setting database option. Now, database level options determine the characteristics of the database that can be set for each database. And these options are unique to each database, so they don't affect other databases. These database options are set to default values when a database is first created, and can then be changed by using the set clause of the alter database statement. And the following table shows the database options which are supported by SQL Server. On the left, you have the option type and the description. Automatic options, they control automatic behavior of the database. Cursor options controls the cursor behavior. Recovery options controls recovery models of the database. Miscellaneous options controls the American National Standards Institute's compliance. And state options is controlling the state of the database, such as is the database online or offline, and whether users are connected. Okay, now the following code snippet, when executed, sets auto shrink on for the CastDB database. So I'll copy this and paste it and execute it. Now let's look at what we have here. And as I said, every time you make changes, you remember to save your work. We want to automatically shrink the databases that have free space. That is what we want to do. The first statement I'm going to execute is called the use statement. Now, what the use statement does is to change the current database. If you look up here, you can see that the current database is the master database. I'll highlight this, then click on the execute command. You notice up here, this changes. The other way you can go about switching this is by clicking on this drop down and selecting the database you would like to use. I'll take it back to what it is that we had. Then we can execute the command in your slide. I'll highlight that, then click on execute, and you can see that the command completed successfully. We move on. Now, the AdventureWorks 2012 database. Now, remember, we have already downloaded the AdventureWorks 2016. We're just going to install it next. Now, the AdventureWorks 2012 or 2016 database consists of around 100 features, and some of the key features are given below. We have the database engine, analysis service, integration services, notification, reporting services, application facilities, a set of integrated samples for 2 multiple feature-based samples. That is the HR resume and the storefront. A sample database consists of 3 parts. We have the AdventureWorks 2012 sample online transaction processing database. This is what we downloaded. We have the sample data warehouse. This is for companies that deal with large amounts of data. And we have one for sample analysis services database. File groups. Now, in SQL Server, data files are used to store database files, and a data file are further subdivided into file groups for the sake of performance. And each file group is used to group related files that together store a database object. You remember what we say the database object is, and every database has a primary file group by default. This file group contains the primary data file, and the primary file group data files are created automatically with the default property values at the time of creation of the database. User-defined file groups can then be created to group data files together for administrative, data allocation, and placement purposes. An example, 3 files named customer data1.ndf, customer data2.ndf, and customer data3.ndf can be created on 3 disk drives, respectively. This can then be assigned to the file group customer F group 1. A table can then be created specifically on the file group customer F group 1. Queries for data from the table will be spread across 3 disk drives, thereby improving performance. Following table shows file groups that are supported by SQL Server 2012. We have the primary. Now, this one is created by default, and it consists of the primary file, and all system tables are placed inside the primary file group. Then we have those that you create, which are calling the user-defined file groups. Now, this is any file group that is created by the user at the time of creating or modifying databases by issuing the alter database command. Now, how do we add file groups to an existing database? File groups can be created when databases are created for the first time, or they can be created later when more files are added to the database. However, files cannot be moved to different file groups after the files have been added to the database, and a file cannot be a member of more than 1 file group at the same time. A maximum of 32,767 file groups can be created for each database, and file groups can contain only data files. A transaction log cannot belong to a file group. The syntax to do this is given here. Now we have the create database command. Then we have the file group command here. And this is what you're interested in. Now, primary and associated file spec list. So this defines the primary files. And the first file specified in the file spec entry in the primary file group becomes the primary files. Now, this file spec means we're talking about file specifications. And as you can see, we have comma all the way up to n. It means that we can have several files. And of course, the first one we said is the one which becomes the primary file. The primary file. We have an example, so we are going to copy paste this, and as usual, we are going to add the names. Okay, in your home machine, you don't have to do that, so just copy and paste this in to your SMS into the scripts window. Now I've pasted and made the edits, and remember that problem we had earlier on, so make sure that everything is in one line. We don't want to encounter that. Now I've specified the purpose of this query. It's up here. So I want to remove the query results window. Now to do this, you hold down your control key, tap on R on the keyboard, and that closes the query window. Now you can see everything here. I'll highlight this, then click on execute, and you can see the command completed successfully. We can resize this as well. Okay, I hope you can see everything. So make sure you're very careful when copy pasting this, and in case you get any errors, please pause the video, check everything, and continue. We move on. Okay, we want to see where these were created. I'll have to switch back to the server machine so that you can see these files. Okay, I'll switch to the server, and the files are created here. So this is the first one all the way up to this, and you can see the creation time. This is the time I was recording this. Okay, we move on. Now the syntax to add a file group to an existing database is given below. So alter database, we already had this command. So I'm just going to highlight this and paste it, and then we move on. Now we have this, we specify the purpose in a comment, then we execute the command. I'll highlight, then click on the execute button. The command completed successfully. Then we move on very quickly. Now, so okay, we've seen this, and the file group is added to the existing database, that is in the customer database. Now, please go and check this in your local machine and confirm whether this has been added as a challenge. Okay, we move on. Now, default file group. Now, objects are assigned to the default file group when they are created in the database, and the primary file group is the default file group. And this default file group can be changed using the alter database command. Of course, this is when you have multiple files inside there. The system objects and tables remain within the primary file group and don't go into the new default file group. Please remember that. To make the FG read-only file group as default, it should contain at least one file inside. And the following code snippet shows how you can create a new file, add it to the FG read-only file group, and then make this FG read-only file group as the default file. Now, what you're going to do, copy this, then paste, then we continue. Okay, I've pasted. Let me save my work very quickly in case of anything. Now, I'll highlight this, then we can execute it. Click on execute, and you can see that the command completes, and it tells us that the file group property default has been set. We get this message as stated, as you have seen, and please feel free to check this in your own machine. Now the transaction log. As I had mentioned earlier, a transaction log in SQL Server records all transactions and the database modifications made by each transaction. And the transaction log is one of the critical components of the database. It can be the only source of recent data in case of a system failure. The transaction log supports operations like the ones given below, recovery of individual transactions. An incomplete transaction is rolled back in case of an application issuing a rollback statement or the database engine detecting an error. The log records are used to roll back the modifications. Recovery of incomplete transaction when SQL Server is started. Now, if a server that is starting SQL Server fails, the database may be left in an inconsistent state. When an instance of SQL Server is started, it runs a recovery of each database from the transaction log, rolling a restored database file group page forward to the point of failure. Now, the database can be restored to the point of failure after a hardware loss or disk failure affecting the database files, supporting transactional replication. Now, the log reader agent monitors transaction log of each database configured for replications of transactions. Supporting standby server solution. Now, the standby server solution, database mirroring and log shipping depends on the transaction log. Working of the transaction log. Now, a database in SQL Server has at least one data file and one transaction log. If you look at the first query we executed, you can see this. Now, data and transaction log information are kept separated on the same file, and individual files are used only by one database. SQL Server uses the transaction log of each database to recover transaction, and the transaction log is a serial record of all modifications which have occurred in the database, as well as transactions that perform the modification. This log keeps enough information to undo the modification made during each transaction. We'll see this in a later session. And the transaction log records the allocation and the allocation of pages and the commit or rollback of each transaction. This feature enables SQL Server either to roll forward or to back out of a given transaction. The rollback of each transaction is executed in the following ways. A transaction is rolled forward when a transaction log is applied. A transaction is rolled back when an incomplete transaction is backed out. Adding log files to a database. Now, the syntax to modify a database and add log files is given below. Okay, we are saying we have this alter database name. Then this is the part that we're interested in, add log file. Then you specify the file specification. You can give a number of transaction log files. Okay, we move on. Now, we want to see how you can create a database using the GUI now instead of typing in commands. We'll do this very quickly. So let me guide you on this. You can read these slides on your own. Now, to do this, make sure you can view the Object Explorer. If this is not visible, what you do is go to the View menu. Then we select Object Explorer, keyboard shortcut F8. We continue. Now, to create a new database, you right-click on the Databases node. Then you select New Database. Then you get this window, New Database. You give your database a name. Now, we are going to delete this database that we are creating here. And I can call it DB to delete. Okay. The next thing you're supposed to do, you're supposed to specify the size of the primary file group. In your slides, they're saying 3 MB. Now come here, you can click on the down spinner arrow. Then tap on enter to confirm. Then after that, if you want to change the owner, you can change the owner here. Remember what I told you, that if you change it to somebody else in a machine that is linked to the domain, you might not be in a position to do that. In your own machine, since you're the SA, you can give it permission, you can change the owner to anybody, and then take back the ownership. Now, the next thing we want to do is specify the collation. To do that, we click on Options, click on this option, scroll down. In your slides, they are telling us to use the one for Indic General, or letter I, 100, CSAIKS. Okay, this one. This is what they're telling us to use. You can also use the one we used, the one for SQL Latin 1 General, CP1 CIAS. And please find out what these abbreviations mean. They have a specific meaning. You specify the recovery model as full. Click on File Groups. then click Add File Group, type in a name. You can give it your own name, then underscore FG. Then to create this database, just click on the OK button. Now give the server some time to do this, and this is done. If you look at the Object Explorer at the bottom here, the DB to delete is created. Okay, so that is how you create the database. We are through with this page. Now we continue very quickly. Now, types of database modification methods. Now, the following table lists and describes types of modifications of databases and the modification methods. Type of modification, you want to increase the size of the database. So the method is alter database statement or the database properties in SSMS. Changing the physical location of a database, you will issue the alter database statement. Adding data or transaction log files, you type in the alter database statement or the database properties in SSMS. You want to reduce the size of the database, that is to shrink it. You type in the dbcc shrink database statement or use the shrink database option in SSMS, accessed through the node of the specific database. Shrinking a database file, dbcc shrink file statement. Deleting data or log files, alter database statement or the database properties in SSMS. Adding a file group to a database, alter database statement or the database properties in SSMS. Changing the file group, alter database statement, and we have changing the database option, alter database statement or the database properties in SSMS. And we saw that changing the database owner, you use the sp change db owner system stored procedure. Now we want to delete the database, so a full backup of the database needs to be taken before dropping a database. Now this is a destructive change, and unfortunately there is no recycle bin for this. A deleted database can only be recreated by restoring the backup. So kindly be very careful when you are deleting or dropping a database. Now how do we go about this? Steps to delete or drop a database using SSMS. You have to right click in the Object Explorer and then expand the instance. Expand the databases, then right click the database to delete, then click delete. What you're saying is, like the database we have created, you can go where it's located in your machine, you right click on it and then select delete from the menu that appears. This is what you're talking about. You can also issue this command. The syntax to delete or drop the database using TSQL is given below. Create, sorry, I think there is something, there was a typo in this. Anyway, let me show you how we go about deleting the database. Now, I have just typed in this. I spared you watching me type in this. Now, this is the database we want to create, and I'm going to pin the Object Explorer. I'll refresh it first. Now, the database we want to delete is this. That is the DB to delete. And you can see there is a word of caution here. We have to be very careful when issuing this statement. So I'll highlight this, then click on execute. And you see it tells me command completed successfully. Now, it still appears here, but if you come here and refresh, after refreshing, you can see that the database is actually gone. Now I'll save my work, and I think that is the last thing we're supposed to do today. So let's go through the summary very quickly. Now, an SQL Server database is made up of a collection of tables which store the sets of specific structured data. SQL Server 2012 supports three kinds of databases. We've seen the system databases, the user-defined databases, and the sample databases. SQL Server uses system databases to support different parts of the database management system. A fictitious company, AdventureWorks Cycles, is created as a scenario, and the AdventureWorks 2012, in our case 2016 database, is designed for this company. The SQL Server data files are used to store database files. which are further subdivided into file groups for the sake of performance. Objects are assigned to the default file groups when they are created in the database. And the primary file group is the default file group. A database snapshot is a read-only static view of an SQL Server database. Thank you. Nice time and God bless.